Time to start. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Könlein. I'm going to talk to you about running Eclipse projects successfully at Eclipse for the next couple of minutes. This is the last slot. I guess we're all a bit exhausted. This is why it's not too technical. I hope it's at least a bit entertaining. So, just to start with a bit of credibility, I've been joining lots of projects on Eclipse, and there were successful ones and less successful ones. So this is like the Hall of Fame. The most successful ones I'm proud to be part of is Xtext. So I'm really going to tell you a lot of how we did things in Xtext and what I think was important to make Xtext as successful as it is. I consider this very successful because we have customers all over the world. We even reach out beyond the Eclipse community. So I guess if you have a look at the program of this conference, you can. It's not a problem to say that this is a successful framework. But there are other frameworks. There's Extend, a programming language based on Java that is not as successful as Xtext, but also successful, especially in the modeling community. But as it's the case, I can maybe try to find some reasons for that later. This is my personal pet project. It's actually not an Eclipse project. It's not as successful, of course, not as big, but I think it has a lot of potential. But what may be interesting, if you know me longer, is that I used to have a project that was called EMF Index, and that was disqualified. So that died really 1 year after it was created. And it may be interesting to look at the reasons for that as well. So maybe you get some ideas about what makes it successful and what not. But in the end, the problem is still, after the fact, you never know whether it was effort that made you successful or whether it was just plain luck. So don't expect me to give you the hints that make everyone successful. I can, of course, not do that. But we try to analyze a bit. So how does a project usually start? You have an idea. Yeah? You have an idea what you want to do, and you think it's really great. Okay? You do something very new, and yeah, then you think a little bit about it and say, oh yeah, that should be a project at Eclipse. That's cool. And then you start writing a proposal. Is that right? You shouldn't do that. Why shouldn't you do this? This is maybe one of the reasons that EMF Index failed. Okay? We started to raise attention for something that we hadn't built. We attracted all kinds of people with all kinds of requirements. We got in all kinds of political trouble because everyone wanted to steer that project as well. And in the end, we couldn't come to accords, and it failed. All right? So this is bad. It's bad to start with the specification. What is the project description? It's much better to start with code. Build a prototype, get your own requirements clear, try to limit the scope to what you think is important, and you get a much better and clearer idea if you have a prototype and an existing code base. You can do that alone or with your small group of peers, but don't try to get too many parties in it right from the beginning. Okay? You have to have something solid in order to base future discussions upon that. So this is a very, very important thing to note here. We had that with Xtext. There was a full prototype coming from the open architecture framework. So we had already an idea how far that could go, and we knew a bit about the scope. So we were able to start an Eclipse project. So talking about code, this is the only technical part of this discussion. I thought it would be fun to look at the first commit of Xtext and see whether there are any hints of something that could make it successful in the future. And this is it. You can really use Git to see the first commit. That was cool, even though that was in CVS, of course, at that time, because we've been running Xtext for years. Exactly 8 years, 8.5. So this is really an old project. Still successful. And why is that? Okay, you can see right from the first commit that we didn't start from scratch. We were building upon existing, proven technology, like EMF in this case. And this is still one of the factors that make the success of the Xtext project. We once said it at a conference, that's just a funny side note, we asked the attendees, what would you think if we pulled out EMF from Xtext because it causes us so much trouble. do something else. And everyone's also like, no, never do that, okay? So that seemed to be a good decision right from the start to build a proven technology. This is very special about Xtext. It's our geek success story. We've been eating our dog food right from the start. Xtext is built with Xtext. The Xtext grammar language has a grammar, and it indeed is already there in the first commit. So we really did, from the first commit, we started eating our own dog food. So that signals to your community, you believe in the success of it because you use it yourself. And if it's bad to use, you will change it in a way that it doesn't hurt yourself, and by that, your users either. Okay, and one more thing here is, look at that. Test, 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 test. Almost half of the files in here belong to tests. So we did test-driven right from the beginning. It's not that we are these cool guys, but that really gives more confidence to people who use your framework. They see, okay, this guy has written a lot of tests. So that may actually work, not have too many bugs. So these are just a few hints, you know? It's not about saying Xtext is so great because we did everything right. In fact, we did a lot of mistakes as well. I'm coming to that. But these are maybe some hints that you could also take into consideration technically. And there is, of course, continuity. So we have the project lead has been there for the entire lifetime of the project, me as well, and others. So we have really constantly been building upon that, extending it, stripping it down again, and so on. So it's a live project. One of the most difficult things for a project, from my point of view, is keeping the focus. Okay? I already said that if you start with code, you have a deeper understanding of what you actually want to do, so it's easier also to say, oh, maybe this is a bit too far, maybe this could be an addition outside of the project, maybe this is out of scope. Let's try to keep it simple and focus on the essential part. And that is already hard in the beginning, and that's going to be a nightmare in the whole run of the project. Because you will, if you're successful, you will get requirements from all kinds of people. And they say, you must do that, you must do that, this should be in. And then you try to prototype something, add some feature, and later on you kind of say, oh, we should better have not added that feature. How do we ever get it out again without breaking API? So this is really one of the hardest things. And you should really concentrate. And you should, and this is very important, you should have your own vision on that project. And don't let anybody else destroy that vision. It's very important. So just to give you an example, what we may have not done so good is, this is how we kept focus in Xtext. So in the beginning, we had like one single component, the Xtext core, and that had the Eclipse integration. Then we invented Xbase, the Java part of it, Java binding, the programming language in Xtend. And that was so cool, we thought, oh, we could get it out of Xtext, make it a separate project. Then again, we said, oh, no, that's too much effort. We integrated it again. And then we added a few more platforms. So you see, that thing really grew bigger and bigger. And we did a lot of decisions to split it up, unite again, and they were mostly technically motivated. And in the end, now we say, OK, this is far too much to manage in a single blob, and this gives user bad expressions, new users who kind of check out the entire thing and are not interested in maybe Eclipse or Extend. So we split it up into smaller parts and make it easier to consume. Still, this is all under the umbrella of the Xtext project. But you see, we carry a lot of weight with this technical depth. So yeah, you should really try to keep focus. Let's talk about tools. So you set up a new project. You have to make a lot of decisions on the tools you use. When it's Eclipse, it's likely you're going to use Eclipse as an IDE. But that goes beyond that. The good thing in Eclipse is you get a whole tool set for free, and it's all pre-configured for you. That's really cool. So you get Git integration, you get Git hosted at Eclipse. So the repository is actually hosted there. You get Bugzilla For bug tracking, you get Gerrit for code reviews, which is very important. So if you really want to have contributors, provide an infrastructure for code reviews. Hudson for doing the builds. You are most likely to produce P2 repositories, Eclipse repositories, update sites. We have the Thought Forum, and recently they added Mattermost as a chat platform if you want to have that for internal or even for external communication. This whole set of tools, and it's great to use them, and it's really cool that you get so much support even by the DevOps of Eclipse who run these services on their servers. Well, there's also a backside to it. The backside is that this is very great if you live in the Eclipse universe. But if you try to get out of the Eclipse universe, meaning no longer maybe producing Eclipse plugins, but libraries for the Java community, this is kind of alien. Why? Because people are not looking at Git at Eclipse for finding your project. They're looking at GitHub. They may not have an Eclipse account to file a bug. They may not be familiar with Gerrit. They may not want to use Hudson, and they may not at all produce P2 repositories. They want to do something else. So if that's really the case for you, really you must consider exchanging some of these tools on the tool stack. And I know that Eclipse operators, they kind of hate us for doing that every now and then. But it makes absolutely sense. So for us, it made a lot of sense to go to GitHub, because everyone is at GitHub. You get much more visibility, and especially if you're targeting the open source or the Java community in general, not just the Eclipse bubble, you should consider doing that. And I know a lot of projects follow it now. Jeff 4, for example, is also at GitHub. When you're at GitHub, users have a certain expectations, so Bugzilla may no longer be the appropriate tool, as well as Gerrit. So you may want to use GitHub issues instead, and pull requests instead of Gerrit requests. How is it called in Gerrit? Gerrit commits? No, I don't know. Hudson is a great thing, but you may know a bit about the history of Hudson and Jenkins, and it looks, at least from my point of view, that Jenkins evolved a bit further than Hudson did, so we run our build service on Jenkins, not on Hudson. There's a bit more we get from there. And of course, you don't want to create P2 repositories, but also Maven repositories. And you may want to push them to Maven Central and not to, well, in addition to Maven Central. And yeah, of course, you could choose alternatives for all kinds of tools you have there. So it's good to start with that set of tools you have at Eclipse, but you should consider whether they're always the right ones. Maybe in the long run even. Because the most important thing is, if you really want to build a community, if you want people to use your tool, you have to get them on board as fast as possible. It should be as easy as possible to just check out the code, build it, run it, and find out whether it's the right thing for you. With GitHub you can do that. It offers all kinds of these services. With Eclipse, I mean, if it already takes some effort to find the repository, that has improved a lot, but like a year ago, I tried to find some project, where's the source code, and it wasn't even the first hit on Google, so it was really hard to find that. GitHub is usually one of the best hits. Yeah, so if you want users to board very fast, you have to be where they are. So they have to see you easily, find you easily, and that also means that it's important for you, if you do Java development, plain Java libraries, to push to Maven Central. This is where people look for libraries. If you really decide to do plugin development within Eclipse, then Oomph is a really great option for you. Oomph has really changed the way we use Eclipse entirely. Okay, you can get a whole configuration of the IDE with the source code checked out, the right setup and everything, without any interaction. You can all pre-configure that. But the backside is, it is Eclipse, it might take long, and if it fails, you may have a hard time to find out why. This is really great, but it is completely alien if you're not from the Eclipse planet. You know? No one wants to have that. So it must be easier for people who are using IntelliJ, for example. You want a small repo footprint. Maybe you check even the settings in, which ties it a bit to Eclipse, but makes it easier to run multiple projects in the same workspace. You have to set up a build, and you have to kind of expose the continuous integration to possible contributors. So get people in easy, offer them services, make contributions easy. This is how it looks from our point of view currently. So we set up GitHub. So this is a PR from my colleague. Is he here, Christian? Yeah, here he is. A pull request, as it's called in GitHub. And you see we even have configured that in a way that, for example, the IP validation, which is very important at Eclipse, is already integrated in the CI. And you can run all the tests from there. We currently do not expose the testing thing to the outside, but I guess that's a matter of discussion where we do it. We spend a lot of effort on that. And even we can run the entire build on a branch, so it will produce the entire thing up to the P2 repository or whatever artifact comes out in the end, such that you can check it out and really install that on machine. And so it's no effort just to make your own private bug fix release if you want so, but it's mainly for testing, so you get the entire thing. This is Jenkins. We run that our own. And of course, for the official builds, which have to be signed, we still use Hudson, because we cannot sign on our private machines. All right, so that was the easy boarding part. Let's have a look at something else, that is documentation. Documentation has so long been an issue with Xtext. Because Xtext has a certain complexity. And if you ask me, you can never do it right. Okay? You can ask a lot of documentation, then no one reads it. You can write little information, then everyone complains. And this is a bit mean. Those who complain most about missing documentation, that's my experience, they read least of it. So you cannot get that right, but there is documentation, and you have to provide documentation, otherwise no one will ever use your project. What do you do? So let's have a look what you have to provide. What is documentation? There's Eclipse help, if you're an Eclipse project, if you want to have your things in the Eclipse help. There is online help from your website. There may be a printed version of your documentation, and you may even consider writing a book. Writing a book has been a story since we started building Xtext. So we always said, oh, should we write a book on it? Yeah, but it's so much effort. Oh, but rather using all the credits, and it would be so cool. But we never got beyond that point until just someone else came and wrote the book. And it's completely okay, and it's absolutely great. So if you have really community grows, you will have a lot of clever people who are starting to write books on your thing. In our case, it was Lorenzo Bettini, and of course, we supported him in doing so. We reviewed and so on. This is just a side story. But then, this is 4 kinds of media. That, of course, infers some requirements. You don't want to build the entire documentation for each of these media types from scratch. You want to kind of have single sourcing. It's about code, so you want to have code highlighting in the documentation. You may want to have it searchable. You may want to link to source code or to Java docs when it's online. Such a user clicks on this class foo does this and that, and he clicks on the foo, and he gets the Java doc or whatever page of that. And it should be easy to contribute, because of course there are as many bugs in the documentation as in the code. So sometimes fixing a typo shouldn't really cost too much. We tried almost everything to get the documentation in place for Xtext. We wrote plain HTML. We had a tool chain with docbook that was very complicated, that generated everything with using LaTeX and whatever. Then we said that, oh, we have a framework for domain-specific languages. Why not write a language for documentation? That was Xdoc. It didn't turn out so well, so we skipped that as well. But the speciality of that one is it had integrated links to the source code. So you really realized when you said, oh, this is class foo, and the foo class does not exist. So that was even what was a cool thing about it. We had a time where we allowed users to comment on our documentation, which did not make too much sense in a long time and attracted a lot of spam. And we ended up with this one, Markdown a Jackal. So in fact, our entire website, including the documentation, is built with Markdown. And we use Jekyll. This is a Ruby-based technology that converts Markdown to HTML on the fly. So it's actually pretty easy to change the documentation. Why? Well, that looks like this. So you're on our website, you browse the documentation, and there's a little button up here, edit on GitHub, and we do that. Oh, you get the Markdown, and as I'm a committer, I'm of course always logged in. You know, this is a bit easier. It usually may require some fork that you don't even see on your disk, but then you can have a PR, and we will immediately merge that if it's just a typo or whatever. So it's the easiest way, I think, to let others participate in the documentation and also to make it maintainable for us. All right. This is your project. You present it to some friends, and they say, yeah, there are other projects. Some may even look a bit like yours. And then you go to Eclipse, like say, it's a modeling project. Oh, there are more projects around that. And then they see, oh, this is the entire Eclipse. And then say, oh, Eclipse is just a bubble in the entire universe. So where is your fish? Somewhere here? Okay. It's a problem. People don't find it. What you need is marketing. And this is, especially when you start a project, and if you're more a developer, like I am, marketing is a hard thing. Okay? You really have to force yourself to do some of that. And the question is how? Xtext is a very technical project, so we have to do kind of technical marketing targeting developers. But also, we need some marketing targeting deciders in software companies. So the first rule is, of course, to be loud. So you write about it in magazines, you tweet about it, you blog about it, you give interviews and all that stuff. But that doesn't have too much effect when people don't know you. Okay, you can be as loud as you want. You have to find more people, get a community, get people listening to you. How do you do that? Well, the best thing is make others talk about you. So you can find important people when you go to conferences, tell them what you do, try to raise their attention, and maybe they will talk about it. If you have a customer already, let him talk about it. And if you present your stuff, come up with success stories. Okay, then you can say, oh, this customer used it successfully. That is publicity for you and for the customers. So it's the best thing you can do. And this is one of the real benefits, no, sorry, that's the next topic. Your website. You have to build a website. I know many Eclipse projects don't care too much about their websites. Sometimes they are successful anyway. There are very successful ones which have a website that even has pointers to CVS repository. I've just seen that lately. So they haven't been touched for 5 years, 6 years, something like that. But usually your website is really, it's your business card. It should be good. You have to spend some time on that. And we did that a lot. So Sven was particularly involved with that because he really has a good hand for design. And there were times when they said, oh, look at the Xtext website. This is how you should do it. And then we were like, everyone was doing it the same way. So we had to reinvent that and do something else in order to be different from the others. So if your website looks like just all other languages, all other websites, it doesn't make sense, not much sense. So you have to really care about that. So mind the design, give it a facelift every 2 years maybe, and use up-to-date web tech. So a plain HTML4 site will not do these days. And this is the good thing about being at Eclipse. There are so many people who could help you with marketing and so many opportunities to offer your project to others. Join the demo camps, that's the easiest thing to do. Try to get a talk accepted at Eclipse conferences. It may not be easy, but there's a mentorship program. They even help you. They want the community to build up the content for these conferences. If you blog, be on Eclipse Planet, ask the foundation staff, ask Ralph what you could do to get more contacts or whatever, or ask the marketing team. There's a lot of people at your disposal. And their newsletter, and they're always looking for content. Okay, last topic is community. I cannot really give you a good list of what you have to do to build up a community. It just appears, okay? You have to be motivated, you have to do it right, you have to be credible, and then people will find interested in what you do, and then they will, kind of talk to you, they will get your stuff, and so on. But in the long run, they may also want to contribute. So what do? You get a lot of contributions from the outside. You say like, you have to build this into the project. You have to add that. And you just think, my scope will get lost. What can you do? So this is when your project gets really large, that happens a lot. And the best thing is you can try to build an ecosystem. What I mean by that is this one. When people contribute, there are two things that drive them. One is, of course, they want to do something good and deliver something to the world, but the other one is they want to be seen as well. So why not list them? So give them the credits they earn, list them on your homepage as community members and people who did cool things with Xtext in this case, but also make sure that it's their projects and that you are not carrying the long-term technical debt of that, because we cannot, of course, maintain all that stuff. So this is actually quite cool. On Xtext, you have that community page, and you find so many people doing cool things with Xtext, and they all get their credits by being listed here. And you will be found by Google and that one. Okay, my last point is stay alive. Open source, work for an open source project is, of course, work. And I read a lot about people with burnout in the internet, people running open source projects in their spare time, and they give up because they get ill, because they get fed up, and they just give up. Okay, don't underestimate that this is actually work. So what can you do? In the long run, you have to find time to do that. That doesn't exhaust you. You may have to find people who sponsor your work, or you work for a company that allows that within your working hours. And there are a few companies of that. And they're all looking for new employees, of course, as everyone nowadays. So really, keep an eye on yourself. Don't let the trolls that will appear give you sleepless nights. Usually these go away with time. Don't react too much on that. We had a nice, strange trolling accident in our bug tracker once. I remember there was one guy, he really got upset because we didn't accept his feature because we thought it wasn't good. And we tried to do it in a very polite way, and he just came back and he just, kind of exploded in text. We kept calm, and that was the entire trick. Just kept calm, and at that time we were so big that even others started to tweet about that. They said like, "Look at that troll! He did that funny stuff and tries to be bad and all that like." So that was pretty nice. You get the backing sometimes from the community if it really works. All right. So there was no trick, no major hint to get successful. And you see, sometimes you even are successful even though you make mistakes. But I hope that was a bit entertaining anyway. And I hope you have success with whatever you do in the Eclipse in the Eclipse project. Maybe I have time for some questions. Do you have any questions? I don't really expect questions at the last slot of the conference of that size. All right. So it was a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you very much. I guess the evaluation is still open, so you can still do that even a week after the conference. Don't have to do it right now. Enjoy the closing session. It was a pleasure to be here. Bye-bye.